Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. It's Thursday. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today I'm joined by John Paul Mason. Welcome back. Sorry I didn't make it last week, but I've been here 3 days in a row on the Axon Bulletin. It's pre-season. There's loads of chat around gossip, who's coming in, who's going out. The strapline, it doesn't ask the question, it makes the statement. Why Celtic summer spend should top £25 million. We'll be talking about that and all other manner of things Celtic related. JP, how's your week been so far?
Hectic, to say the least. Kind of not stop for breath. This is one of the first times I've actually sat down in my flat for about 6 or 7 days. But yeah, it's been good. Just a lot of gigs, just sort of holding on for dear life, really. But yeah, missing the foot. I missed the football last night. Missed the Scotland game. Was working a show, so I don't know if it was as bad as all that. Seen a lot of comments saying that we were not at the races. I actually had tickets briefly for about 24 hours, and then I had to give them up because I was working. I couldn't get it covered, so I spared myself however bad that was. I mean, did you see the game? Was it bad?
I didn't actually, and not because I'm anti the national team or any of that kind of stuff, JP, just similar to yourself, a wee bit hectic, going down to Nottingham tomorrow for a music festival that we're covering, so last night was a bit of a catch-up with the old Zeds for myself. Missed it, looked at the score after the event, because you always wake up at some ungodly hour if you've had a wee nap. You get to an age where you have a wee nap, JP, you and I are in that stage of life. And you wake up at like 2 a.m, have a look at the result. Wasn't surprised, I've got to say, I wasn't surprised by the result. But what I'm going to ask you about that, even though I haven't watched the game as such, is it time for Callum McGregor to be Scotland captain as well as Celtic captain?
Do you know, I saw a lot of that online. I don't really know if it makes a massive difference, and people seem to have jumped on Andy Robertson a bit because he had a couple of beers on a bus. The bus thing is a completely different kettle of fish. That is one of the most embarrassing things I've ever seen in my life. A bus parade for a cup double. I mean, really, was that necessary? I don't know if I would have gone through with that. There maybe be people that agree with it and think it was all right, but it was a bit weird. But I don't have any issue with Andy Robertson having a couple of beers 3 days before a match. I mean, it's not as if he was tanning a bottle of Buckfast or something like that. Do you know what I mean? A couple of beers is surely not going to have that big an impact.
You see the thing, JP, it's obviously like yourself. I've come through this period of, kind of the old style football, and that change into the modern game that we saw. I think the advent of that was the introduction of Sky broadcasting back in 92, I think it was 93. The Champions League, the advent of that, and what we now see as modern football, and how we view modern footballers, and we view them as completely different beings, like these specimens that are athletes that can't possibly enjoy fast food or a beer now and again. And I just think that's unrealistic. I really do. I mean, I think it would be absurd if they were to do something daft the night before a game, couple of nights before a game. But a few beers, is that going to make any difference to someone who all year round is looking after their body like it's a machine? I don't think so. I'm not getting too excited about that, to be honest. But it did bring up something I remember Andy Lynch telling us when we were working on his book. He was out of favour in the Celtic team, and some of the older heads will remember it. So he comes in as a player from Hearts. He's a left winger. He can't get a game, and he disappears, and he's actually out the team, JP, for 18 months, bizarrely, and he's playing for the reserves. And I've said to you before, the guy that swapped him to a left back was John Clark, who was looking after the reserve team at the time. But before he put him at left back, he tried him elsewhere, and he put him up centre forward a few times. He started scoring goals, but he was so out the picture that he decided to go on the first team's Christmas night out, even though the reserves were playing Rangers the next day at Celtic Park, and he knew he would be in the reserve squad. But he decided to try and feel more part of the first team. He would go on the night out with Big Billy and all the rest of the troops and Jinky and all this kind of thing. As you can imagine, there was a few beers supped. He woke up in the morning with a raging hangover, and he had 1 hour to get up to Celtic Park and play Rangers. And you can dig through the old Celtic views. Andy Lynch went out and scored 4 goals that day, and that was after probably rocking in at 2 or 3 in the morning steaming.
Wow.
You know, I'm not saying that's the way we've got to approach football. Absolutely not. But when I see that, I think, you know, had we got through, had we got a decent result, nobody would have bothered about a few beers 3 days ago, would they?
No, I don't think so. And I think the whole pitting Andy Robertson against Callum McGregor, I don't really know what difference that would make to Scotland if Callum McGregor was a captain or not. I think Callum McGregor deserves to play in the midfield and be a mainstay, contrary to, again, a lot of chatter I saw online last night saying, I saw one text that said Callum McGregor is a myth. Right, so I mean, you're obviously going to know where that's come from in terms of the team that person supports. But you know, there's this. I mean, how could there be a kind of lobby for Ryan Jack to start over Callum McGregor based on this season? Do you know what I mean? I mean, we've watched Callum McGregor week in, week out. He drove the team. He picked the team up by the scruff of the neck at Ibrox, and arguably that led to us getting back into the game, which led to us getting an equaliser that gave us a platform to go and get a winner, which we did. He played in that midfield, and I don't think there's any doubt that Callum McGregor was worthy of his place in the Scotland team. I'm saying this having not seen the game last night, so I can't say how well or not he played. I know he scored the goal. I did see the goal, and it was a bit of a, you know, it wasn't a worldie, put it that way, but it was a goal nonetheless, and it was a goal that gave us, I guess, some sort of lifeline. Maybe there was no lifeline to be had. I don't know at that stage in the game. I was just checking the score on my phone while I was side of stage. I didn't know what was going on in the actual sort of you know, the play in the game. I didn't know how it was. I know that Craig Gordon saved a few shots early on, so it seemed like we had to weather a storm early on. But as far as Callum McGregor, I'm just happy for Callum McGregor to play for his team, and I love seeing Celtic players play for Scotland. I always have done since I was a wee boy. You know, since back in the Paul McStay days, and Roy Aitken and players like that. You know, seeing guys represent Celtic at an international level is great, and the more Scottish players that we have the better. But captaincy or not, he's a surefire starter for the Scotland team.
Talking of captaincy, it was brought to my attention this morning that a former Scotland captain, Graham Souness, was getting interviewed before the game. JP, you might not have watched the game. Dig out that bit of content, because that is content. So he's talking about being the Scotland captain, and the fans start roaring just at that moment. But coincidentally, they're roaring because the Scotland team are coming onto the park. But Souness, right, with the ego up to here, thinks they're roaring because he's just spoken passionately about captaining Scotland. And you should just watch it. It's brilliant. It will be a meme that will live forever on social media, I'm pretty sure. We're talking about the spend this summer, and I'll give you my rationale behind that massive figure of 25 million quid. I'll also ask you in the comments section, you might be able to check this, have we ever spent that in a transfer window? I would suggest probably not. Patrick Murphy comes in on the YouTube channel. I don't think we as fans should set a number or a figure. Ange will likely know who he already wants. Let's hope we move as swiftly as we did in January. Our board is ultra cautious though. Interesting weeks ahead. I do agree with that. And I think the number isn't being set. It's almost like a predicted cost. Should we buy the two players that we're trying to tie up permanently, JP, in Jota and Cameron Carter-Vickers, and then we add to that with another X amount of players? That is an argument that every single one of us will have an opinion on. How many other players do we need to bring in? I would argue that we need to bring in a left back, another centre half, a striker, and potentially a defensive midfielder. Now, that's over and above Jota and Carter-Vickers. That's 6 players. That's where I'm getting the £25 million from, because if you buy 4 players in, JP, you're going to probably expect to spend 3 to 4 million if they're permanent signings on those players as well. That's where I've come up with the figure. There's another good point coming down here, and I think it's a very decent point Johnny Ryan makes. Have a feeling more loans than buys. Hope I'm wrong. Well, in the past, Johnny, I would agree with every word of that, because I don't think we used the loan system well enough, JP. But if you go by this season's signings, you know, Maeda, Jota, Cameron Carter-Vickers. It's worked for us this time round. So could we perhaps have another 3 loan signings, or will we push the boat out with that big £25 million spend? What's your thoughts?
Well, with regards to the loan signings, it's not something I've ever thought about until I read that comment there. But we've had a tendency to bring loan signings in January, and that isn't really ideal, is it? Because you want a player coming in on loan to get a pre-season, to really feel part of the squad and part of the season ahead, and then play a full season for Celtic, and then you see the players' attributes and what they can contribute over an entire season, rather than coming in like, I know obviously Maeda came in, but that was with an option or an obligation to buy, so it was kind of like we signed him basically. I don't think there was any real doubt that he was going to become a Celtic player. And then you think of players in the past that have come in on loan. Did Oliver Burke come in the January?
He did, aye.
Yeah, so he was the January signing, and then you've got Timo Weah, I think, as well. Jeremy Toljan. There's a good few, and there's probably more that I've forgotten about. So if we are going to go into the loan market, I would say it's better to go into the loan market in the summer, like we did last season with Jota and Carter-Vickers, where they had a full year to feel part of the club, really see what everything's about, rather than just coming in. It doesn't seem late in the day in January, but it does kind of a little bit. It kind of feels like you're walking into a dressing room that's kind of already been in the war, so to speak, in the first four months of the season, and they've already established a bond. But obviously it's testament to the dressing room that we've got, that these players that came in January were able to just, fit in straight away. But they were all essentially signings, weren't they? They weren't loan guys that you kind of thought, oh, these guys are only going to be here till May and then they'll be away. And with regards to the players that coming in and how much money we spend, I think, none of us were saying that. Well, we actually were saying last season or last summer that we had to spend 25, 30 million, and in actual fact, we didn't spend 25, 30 million, contrary to a lot of sniping online. Our net spend was, what was it, like 12 million or something like that, 11 or 12?
Well, we spent 24, brought in 34.
Right.
All in. So we're up. Right, we've got money in the bank.
Yeah, exactly. So we only have to look at last summer to be able to point to that and say, well, we've got a manager and whoever's in charge of the signings who are quite prudent and seem to finally be shopping in the right places, as opposed to, getting in people that don't contribute anything, as is what happened really in the previous summer, where we've still got most of those guys that didn't contribute anything in the season where everything went wrong and there was none of us saw any of the games. And then last season, those guys were still there and they didn't really contribute anything in that season. That's two years worth of players that we paid decent money for that haven't really done anything.
It's going to be hard to get rid of them. This is the thing. And I know that sounds brutal, but we're talking about football, and, football players are commodities for their clubs, right? So I understand that it's very difficult for anyone to go to their work, JP, regardless of the wages, right, and not be able to perform, not be able to actually conduct himself on a Saturday or a Wednesday night and play for their team. However, when it comes to football, when it comes to the guys involved, and we do have a question around that as we move into a kind of review of last season between yourself and I, we just need to move them on. And there's half a dozen players, I reckon, that are in that bracket. And we need to move them on, actually, for the betterment of their own career and their own... I think the best example is Tony Ralston, right? There's a guy who's out the picture for all that time. I used the example of Andy Lynch before. 18 months he was out the picture, and he spoke about how that affected him. It affected his mental health, JP. It must be very, very difficult. You must have some, real strong mental fortitude to come back from it. Andy did, Tony Ralston did. I don't reckon any of the players that we're going to be talking about will come back from it. But I'll be asking that question. Jungle Lion, let's enjoy the weekend without any of that other nonsense. Yeah, absolutely. I'll be working, so that's for sure. The Urban Culture comes in on YouTube. Welcome back. The Dross still hanging around. 11 out, 5 in, and a couple of projects. The 5 in, I'm not a million miles away from that myself. I think 6 players need to come in. I'm also interested to know, what is that cup that the Bairn's sitting in on your avatar, Urban Culture? Please enlighten us. I don't recognise it. A trophy. It's a fairly big... Is it even a trophy? It looks like a trophy.
It's something Sam Memorial, I can see in the typeface.
You've got a better eyesight than I do, JP, that's for sure.
I can't see what precedes the Sam, but I think it's something Sam Memorial. Might be
Urban
wrong.
Culture, let us know. Kenny wants the league for me, Champions League again the following season. I'll be asking JP about that and how he thinks we'll fare in the second European campaign under Ange Postecoglou. And Johnny's back in. Have a feeling more loans and buys, as we said before. In the past, Johnny, I'd agree with you. I would hope that you were wrong, but based on what we know over the last 12 months, I reckon things like loan deals have changed at Celtic Park. No longer will we be looking at Charlie Massonders and John Joe Kenny's. We will be looking at the bigger picture. There was a player actually chatting about his resurgence as a footballer, and it was Lewis Morgan talking about how well he's done over in the MLS. JP, he has taken an opportunity to get away from British football, and he is thriving over there. First with Inter Miami. Where is he now? The New York Red Bulls, I think he is.
See the goal he scored the other day?
Brilliant. I mean, but the reason I bring him up is one of the players that I want to talk about, and there's loads of players who I think their future is in the balance, like seriously in the balance now, is Mikey Johnson. And I've said before, a similar move for Mikey. He's a talented player, JP. Every one of his teammates, when talking about technical ability, always says he's the most talented player in the squad. But it's not going to happen for him at Celtic, is it? I mean, is he someone that could have some kind of resurrection? Is it time to move on?
Well, I mean, you take Lewis Morgan as an example. Lewis Morgan was pretty maligned at Celtic, you know. I mean, admittedly, he was played out of position, and, you know, you go back to the games where, was it the semi-final where he was played up top in the December 2019 League Cup final? He was like, Lewis Morgan started up front, which, you know, on reflection seems completely absurd to think that a guy, you know, who was so lightweight, had never really seemed like he was a striker in any way, starts up front in a cup final. You know, it didn't really make any sense. And then obviously he came off in that game, and he didn't really come off with everybody sort of saying, oh, well, you know, he did a good job or whatever, because he didn't really. And that's probably because it wasn't his position. But Lewis Morgan's an example of someone that could be maligned, written off at Celtic, and go somewhere else and find their comfort zone. And yes, you could argue that obviously the MLS is the level that they're playing at isn't, you know, a great standard, but it's not terrible. It's not like Conference League or anything like that. You know, he's playing in front of big crowds. He's got pressure to deal with, and yeah, he's doing well. And I'm really happy for him. Like I never had an issue with Lewis Morgan. It just didn't seem to work for him at Celtic, and you could tell that he was a decent player. Mikey Johnston might arguably be better than him, and therefore could go somewhere like the MLS and tear it up. And I don't think anybody would have any ill will towards him. I mean, there does seem to be a lot of negativity towards Mikey Johnson, which is, I find that really uncomfortable when you see people really going for someone like that. You know, I don't think Mikey Johnson's done anything maliciously while he's been in a Celtic jersey. You know, like he's just been unfortunate with injury, really, really unfortunate with injury. The turnover of managers probably hasn't helped him either.
Yeah. I mean, who gave him his debut, JP? Who gave Mikey his debut? Was it Brendan
Rodgers? Yeah. Brendan Rodgers. I would have thought so, unless it wasn't. I don't think he played under Dyler, but I might be wrong. But I certainly associate him with that time. unless he played in that game. Remember the game where we cuffed somebody in Dyla's last game?
The 7-0 game against Motherwell.
Might have played in that.
I do remember a picture of him with Brendan and Tony Ralston going up to the Green Brigade section of the park, and Brendan was making sure that they got the applause.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, I think Mikey Johnson will have to take stock of his situation, and whether or not he's got even an opportunity of getting in squads next season, because the competition is there for all to see in terms of our front three. There's a lot going on there, and Mikey Johnston is currently standing outside of all that.
Aye, definitely is. But like you say, I don't think it's nice to hear any kind of abuse to any Celtic players, particularly one who has been kind of unlucky with injury. Certainly managerial turnover. I think also what Lewis Morgan was talking about, JP, was the fact that he himself was unlucky with injury, and also whenever he got a chance, it wasn't always in his preferred position, because getting a game for Celtic is so difficult. One criticism I used to have about him, I thought, again, technically Lewis Morgan was an excellent footballer, but he spent half the game on the deck. He was always getting knocked off the ball. He seemed to lack that bit of upper body strength, which I think is similar to Mikey Johnson. He's a jinky player. He can take guys on, but he doesn't have that physical attribute that maybe you require to a degree in the Scottish game. Lee McGowan comes in. You're on the YouTube, Lee. Good to see you, pal. Good footballer was Lee, by the way. Goalkeeper. Good afternoon, boys. If we spend well this year, we won't make the same mistake we did after Seville by not recruiting better. Now, this is interesting because just the other day we were talking about Martin O'Neill's second season as Celtic manager, and we were having a look at, it was Lawrence and I were having a look at the second European campaign. And I think that with a view really to saying, were we strengthening at that point? Were we developing? Were we evolving as a side, JP? So you look at his first campaign, he wins the treble. Wasn't a great European run. Second campaign, we get through the qualifiers against Ajax. We play Porto, Rosenborg, Juventus, win all the 3 home games, lose the 3 away games, get knocked out even though we got 9 points, and then Valencia do us in the UEFA. But the following campaign is the UEFA Cup final. And then the campaign after that, I think, is the one that Lee McGowan's talking about, and this failure to continue to invest. And I think maybe partly that's where I'm coming from as well. Yeah, I get what people are saying. We don't know who he's interested in. Don't put a figure on it. This isn't us being kind of lax when it comes to finances either, JP. It's just that if you want to strengthen the team that we've got just now in those areas, you are looking at half a dozen players. And that is the kind of figure that you're going to come at. I think he's been brilliant in bringing in players like Matt O'Reilly for £1.5 million. Joe Hart, just over £1 million. Also, I think Eddie Gucci was under £1 million. Was he like 750 grand? And then you've got some of the players coming in for kind of higher fees. Hatate, under 2 million. Juranovic, 2.7. You hope that we're still able to do that kind of business, JP, but we might have to shell out a 4.5 on somebody like Starfelt or Kyogo. So the £25 million could be spent pretty quickly on something like 6 players. I want to have a look at last season with you, JP, because we had our 1000th episode not that long ago. I think we're on about 1014 or 15 now. And I was able to ask quite a few general questions about the season we've just enjoyed, and I'd like to hear your thoughts as well. But before I do that, I need to ask you about the jersey over your shoulder, and also link that into what we've seen so far of the Celtic home and away kits and your thoughts on them. I know you're a big fan of the football jersey.
I just put that up because all I can see right now on many people's social media feeds is Barcelona. So I kind of wish I was in Barcelona right now, because there's a festival called Primavera on. Don't know if you've heard of it. It's right down on the beach front in the Parc del Forum in Barcelona, and it's arguably, no, it is the best festival I've ever been to. Like there's no way. It starts kind of mid to late afternoon and then runs right through till sort of 4 or 5, maybe even later in the morning. And the lineup is always incredible. Like I mean, I'll throw some names at you from this year: Beck, The Strokes, Pavement, Fontaines DC. There's many others as well. It's just always right up my street, and I've been a couple of times, and yeah, it's kind of seeing all the Barcelona posts at the moment. In fact, a friend of mine's there not for the festival, but she took our boy, and they got a stadium tour of Barcelona. And her first time in Barcelona, his first time in Barcelona. He's a mad Barcelona fan. I think he's maybe like 13 or 14, and she sent me a picture of him like beaming in the stadium. Beautiful, blue skies, and brought back memories of being there on quite a cold night in, I think, October 2012, when the Bold Samara scored and put us 1-0 up.
Yeah.
I'll never ever forget looking over at the scoreboard and seeing that we were beating that Barcelona team 1-0. It's like, I mean,
in the Nou Camp.
In the Nou Camp, and like Neil Lennon was about this big away down in the dugout. It was incredible. But I mean, Barca's always the sort of Spanish team that I've liked through the years, and I got that top a couple of years ago. I particularly liked that it had the old Nike badge, with the lettering as well, because a lot of the tops now have just got the tick, and they don't have the Nike above it. So
I like the colour. I think that could work for Celtic. That not the blue, of course.
Well, the kits you talked about, I mean, that kit with the silver, I'm not entirely sure. I mean, that looks like it could be the real deal. Just when you see something like that on a coat hanger, and you could see tags on it as well. So it
was a carpet, wasn't it, JP? The carpet was a giveaway. That's a Celtic Park carpet, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know how the silver will look on. Like, it looked a bit dodgy on the coat hanger. The other one I like. I wish they'd replicated the stripes on the back if you're really nitpicking at it. But I don't understand why they didn't. Maybe they did that because of the numbers thing. Like for Europe,
it does look like that Champions League style big blanket,
like patch on the back. So I don't know. I'll reserve judgment until I can hold it in my hand and see it, because I didn't really like that dark green one from this season with the big shamrock on it. Didn't like that to begin with, and then it grew on me. And I had it on me by the time we played the League Cup final, and it's now. And I've got Kyogo in Japanese on the back. First name I've got in the back since Neil Lennon. So it's that kind of won me over. So I can be won over with Celtic tops. I'm not going to rule them both out straight away.
I said something the other day and I was lambasted for it when it comes to Celtic jerseys, and please just humour us for a bit while we get over our wee jersey affliction, because it is an affliction. I had a reason to photograph the silver and pink one, the bright pink. The only jersey, to my knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong, that we've never worn. We never wore that jersey in a game. Obviously it was a season that was the lockdown season and all that. We never wore that in a game, and I was looking at the pictures and it actually looked okay. Now people are thinking I'm losing my mind when I say that, JP.
Yeah, that wasn't the lockdown season. The pink and silver one.
With the Coviet. The Coviet, the V Coviet, like the Adrionians Coviet. Was that the season before? It would have been actually 2018. Yeah. Never wore it. Still derided. I'm sure there's about 15,000 of them in a cellar somewhere at Celtic Park unsold. But I was looking at it thinking it looked all right.
Nah.
You're not having it, are you?
I'm not having that. No. And it's not because it's pink either. It just, maybe you could make something out of a pink strip or whatever, but I just didn't. Nah, it just didn't resonate with me at all. It's so left field that, it's just something that you've never ever seen before, and I don't really know who pushed the button on that in the marketing department that went, aye, this will work, because it was pretty obvious that even if they showed it to you and I, football strip nerds, we would have probably both given it a resounding thumbs down, But
you take the template.
That's an indication of the whole support. Of course it's not. But we have been kind of into football strips for a long time, and probably have a fairly decent gauge of what would be a success to the support, ergo how much money people would spend on them. And I would have looked at that and went, no, take it off the table, get something
But the
else.
design, make it brown and white. That would have worked. Glasgow's brown and white.
Yeah, totally.
You know,
that would go down well, probably. Like, I mean, obviously it would still probably split opinion, and you'd get people slagging it for obvious reasons for what it, like, potentially could symbolize. But for the St. Pauli connection alone, I think that would go down well.
It would be good. What about a third kit this season, JP? Do we want a yellow kit? I'm a traditionalist. I like the yellow away jerseys.
Yeah, I mean, I think we probably should be a bit more savvy in terms of what strips we can actually wear, because we've made strips recently where we've ended up having to use we had to use the black strip last season, didn't we? Because we didn't have a third kit that wasn't green.
I know.
Which
it's absurd.
Yeah, and then you obviously had the white one, which you couldn't wear because if you're playing Hibs, you couldn't wear that white kit against their green and white. So we had to wear a black kit that wasn't even an issued shirt. To get yourself into that bother is a bit.
It happened before. Remember the other pink jersey that Sinclair wore? We wore it at Easter Road when it was a season out of date.
Yeah.
And we still had to wear it. So yes, I think they need to plan that a little bit better. The underwater cabbage salesman on the golf course listening, love that. Where are you listening to your Axon bulletin at 12:30? I know it's a wee bit different. It's the summer.
Did you see the video of Scott Brown and Johnny Hayes in, I think it was Dubai? Like, Scott Brown was filming Johnny Hayes and he hit an absolute perler of a shot, and you hear Bruni going, "Oh, just as well I was videoing that, eh?"
I thought you were going to say they were also listening to Axon.
Absolute Waynes, both of them. But
Love it. Paul McGirt, can't wait to hear the Champions League music at Paradise again. When was the last time we heard it? Was it 2017?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible, JP. And we've also got Brian Roberts. Welcome to the show, Brian. Spend the money and trust in Ange. That's what we're saying today. We're saying spend that money. Absolutely. List of questions for you, JP. I'm sure we'll go on a few tangents here and there, but that's what it's all about on a Thursday. Most improved player under Ange Postecoglou. Who is the most improved player?
I mean, there's absolutely no question. It's Tony Ralston. He's turned him into a guy that you would absolutely happily have starting for Celtic, whereas previously he was so far out of the picture. That you only need to. The proof in the pudding is everyone's reaction and our reaction on here when Anthony Ralston was given a new deal. I remember speaking about it on here and going, wow, it just shows you how short in numbers we are that we're giving a year deal to Tony Ralston. Because, I think he was probably as surprised as anybody to get that year deal. But he's grabbed the opportunity and proved his worth. And you have to attribute not all of his success, because obviously you've got to give a lot of credit to the player as well. But it works both ways. He was given an opportunity by the manager to show what he could do, and the manager put faith in him, and he's really, really kicked on and impressed everybody and become something of a cult favourite. And that's not easy to do at Celtic. It's certainly not easy to do at Celtic as a Scottish player, because a lot of Scottish players are in and around Celtic, and I think they're a little bit. Look at James Forrest.
I know.
James Forrest is derided by many. Interesting to see his brother sign for Hearts the other day as well. Actually,
Decent signing.
Yeah.
But it's also interesting that Ian McCall reckons he's better than James.
That's just madness.
That's just people opening their mouth and just saying things. Yes.
Sound bites. But it is hard to be a cult success as a Scottish player at Celtic. I mean, Kieran Tierney. There was no way that wasn't going to happen with Kieran Tierney. I mean, he was obviously a well-known Celtic fan from the terraces. Like, he's got a lot of pals in the North Curve and elsewhere, the boys and stuff like that. So he had that linkage. But there's like Greg Taylor, for example. I mean, will Greg Taylor ever win over the entire Celtic support? Probably not. Ralston has. pretty much. I don't think there's not many negative comments you'll see about Ralston. The odd couple here and there, folk trying to be, a bit kind of, what's the word? A bit kind of contrary.
Contrarian, yeah.
Yeah, contrary. Because, I mean, you assess Ralston's, contribution and work this season based on, being at most of the games. And I saw a guy that was trying his hardest. And he's not the best right back in the world. He's not the best, technically gifted football player, but he has a will to win, and you can't have, you want as many people like that in your team as possible.
I just remember, JP, and I remember being called a walloper, which is a great put down. It's one of my favourites, for suggesting that Tony Ralston played well against Livingston that game that he had to play because we had virtually no players due to the Dubai debacle and the fallout of that. And I did feel that he was the best player on the park, but even to suggest that, was met with universal derision. So he was that guy that you were saying before, Mikey Johnson gets a hard time. He was that guy, and he's turned it around to the point where it's actually now surprising. I remember last season there was a game where he wasn't that great against Motherwell away. He'd been out for a few weeks, comes in, and he didn't look his sharp self. He lost the ball far too often. But that's a surprise now. That's not the rule. That is something that you don't expect from Tony Ralston. That's the exception. So Tony gets our vote time and time again on here.
Surely everybody said that, right? Surely everybody said the same player.
Who else has been mentioned? We've had a mention for Joe Hart. I get that, slightly different angle. We've had a mention for Joe Hart because of where he was, prior to coming to Celtic. But Tony Ralston's getting it. CSC all day long at Axom. AJSC Tech. Great headline question from Axom today. I've been thinking about the arithmetic for months. JP, it's a test really of the resolve of the board now. It really is a test. I mean, they came through last season, and we'll all have different views on the board and the fact that a winning team takes a focus off them, which it undoubtedly does. I think the big test is now, right? You've done what you had to do last season. You got the right man. Everybody's going to give you credit for getting the right man in. We don't really know who it is that got him in because everybody's taking a wee bit of credit, JP, for that. Probably Peter Lowell, let's be honest. And you've done well in the transfer market. You've done exactly what we had to do to get us to back to being the top dogs domestically. And now we're looking at it and we're saying, right, let's do a rest on it. Let's go out and get those players. I think the point that came up before is making me wonder whether or not we use the loan market justifiably by saying, look how it's worked for us last season. If we tie up the two. Now, Lanky67, who has been a regular contributor to Axom over the years, had some bad news just the other day in relation to his nephew, and he has given us an update. He's stable, getting better. He's definitely a fighter like his family. Well, all the best wishes and our prayers and thoughts are with you, Lanky, and your family. Hopefully he makes an absolutely 100% recovery as well. And it's good to see that the Axom community are supporting one of their own as well. JP, some of the chat takes diversions and tangents on the chat as well, and that's what it's all about. And it's great to see regular names popping up on the discussion board as well. Now, if it's Tony Ralston, who's going to be next season's Tony Ralston? Will we have someone resurrected like a phoenix from the flames next season, JP? I wouldn't put it past Stange.
Do you know, I thought about this, and there's one player that I would like it to be, and there's one player that I hope it will be, and I think it might be James McCarthy.
Nice.
I think there might still be a place for James McCarthy at Celtic. I don't think that I've seen a lot of people writing out their lists of everybody they think should go this summer, and he features in quite a lot of people's. When they just throw him in with Bolingoli and Ajeti and Barkas, etc. But I've got a feeling that maybe with a decent run in the team, potentially he could offer something. I don't think he's really let Celtic down this season when he's come in. I know he's not played a lot of football. and I'm not entirely sure what the reason for that is. Whether it was that he couldn't get near the team because of how well the midfield were playing, but I don't know. I would like that if that could happen. And now there's two midfield spots. There's two people that were ahead of him for the midfield have gone, in Rogic and Beaton. So there's obviously an opportunity there for him. I don't know. It's a strange one. I remember last summer we spoke about James McCarthy and how many games he would play and how many goals he would have scored between last summer and this summer, and if you were to be completely honest, you're sitting here going, it's not been a great signing. But there's also the added thing is that he might be good for the dressing room, and he's a senior player. He's played at a high level in England. You want people like that around in the same way that obviously Joe Hart's come in and been the influential person that he's played every week. That's a given. But I'm sure Joe Hart's influence in the dressing room stretches beyond the 90 minutes of football on a Saturday or a Wednesday. So I would like to see. I just think it's a strange one because you don't know what's going to happen if we were to release James McCarthy, which we can't because he's on a 4-year deal. Where does James McCarthy go from here? He's only 31. He's not completely past it. So yeah, it'd be interesting if in a year's time we were sitting here talking about James McCarthy having had a stellar season, and what a difference in fortunes from his first season.
We'll bring it up. If in a year's time we are having that discussion, JP, we will bring up this episode, and I'll make sure I don't inadvertently delete it, as I did with quite a few over the last week or so. Well, not all of them, just 3 months worth. And I'll tell you what it is. We actually stream on a platform, which gives you 50 hours worth of a vault. So you can get round to downloading them for the audio service, etc., etc. But you get two options: delete content or delete broadcast. If you click delete broadcast, it will delete it from YouTube, and that's what I did accidentally with 90 or 100 or whatever. So yeah, they are still on Facebook, Twitter, and everywhere else, and also on audio, but you can't see the faces on YouTube. But we're back to normal now, JP. Errors do happen. But I'm just looking at last season. James McCarthy, 22 appearances, many of which were off the bench. I think when we were talking about him, we said something like, if he contributes and he gets 30 games under his belt, and he's contributed to a successful season, then he's been a decent signing because he never cost us anything. But 22 appearances isn't massive. I think we're looking towards next season. Callum McGregor, who is obviously an anomaly, he played 52 games. Carl Starfelt, 49. Juranovic, 35. Wee bit surprised that he played as many as that. And Stephen Welsh, even 24. He was on the fringes. So I think next year, Tony Ralston, 47 appearances. That's brilliant. I think that's probably matching every other appearance that he had played for Celtic previously. So yeah, James McCarthy, that's an interesting shout. Best signing and why? Ange's best signing, or the best signing under Ange, because people even suggest that James McCarthy wasn't an Ange signing. I'm not so sure about that, because I think every single one of them is run by him. Like Joe Hart spoke about it, didn't he? There was an opportunity for us to sign him when we signed Barkas. Postecoglou goes back to him. He's not been identified by Ange Postecoglou, but he had the final word, the final say in whether or not we signed him. So who do you reckon's been our best signing under Ange?
I think for this season, I think Joe Hart. I don't think I can't really get past Joe Hart when I go to think of somebody, because I just think of... I think, like I said, when I was talking about him as an influence in the dressing room, I think it stretches beyond the 90 minutes with Joe Hart, and I just think having such an impact as a goalkeeper at a club, I think one of the reasons people don't really have a lot of nice things to say about Craig Gordon is that he never really displayed a lot of affinity with Celtic. I mean, Celtic's clearly not his team. Hearts is his team, which is why he's back there. I mean, lots of players come to Celtic and don't really immerse themselves in the club, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. If players come and do their job and are successful and leave, and they're not all singing, all dancing Celtic fans as a result, I'm all right with that. I'm not going to lose sleep over it. But when someone does come in and does get it, it's really, really great to see. And Joe Hart has embodied that massively. You just see the way that people react to him at the games, and seeing the footage of him with his family after winning the title and walking around the pitch and stuff like that. And that picture he posted on holiday, and he said the locals here call this place paradise. They've obviously never been, have they? And I mean I know that's, people might be like, oh, it's just playing to the gallery or whatever, but you kind of get the feeling that he does mean what he says. However, if you're talking about signings that may impact next season, I think Daisen Maeda is the signing for me that could. I think Maeda with a pre-season behind him and rest, I'm actually terrified for the defences next season to have to deal with that guy, because we saw it in fairly large bursts of what he can do, and that is a guy that has already had a season of football behind him. I just think he's going to be a candidate for Player of the Year next season. Definitely,
it's a great shout, because
and I don't think that's bravado. I don't think that's like, I always get a little bit uneasy when people start saying, "Oh, this is going to happen, or that's going to happen, or he's going to do this, or he's going to do that." But I'm basing this on the evidence of what I've seen from the guy so far, and what I think he could do next season. So yeah, Maeda.
The thing with that though as well, JP, is that onus on the players who didn't have a break. So Hatate as well. We're going to see Ideguchi, who I think will be a different beast after a pre-season and rest. But then we've got players who didn't get the pre-season under their belt at Celtic who will benefit from that, like Carter Vickers, hopefully. Jota didn't get the pre-season at Celtic. Giakoumakis, Kyogo Starfelt, these guys, O'Reilly, that came in later on, not in the pre-season as such, didn't get the pre-season with Celtic. That's going to galvanise them, embed them into the team even further, and lots to look forward to. But we are still looking to spend another £25 million here. Thomas Conley, watching in sunny Forfar. Hail, hail. Glad to hear it, and welcome to the show. Thomas, Urban Culture is asking, or saying, better not be a music festival. Are we talking about Primavera, or are we talking about Nottingham tomorrow? Because it is a musical festival on both counts. I'm going to Meadowlands to see Jerry Cinnamon, The Cooks, and others. A band called Rats from Liverpool. Dylan John Thomas is on the bill, but we're actually there working. It's not a jolly. We're there working. We're going to get some interviews and some content and footage. And we have Francisco Weldenino. Great name, Francie. Oi, oi, PJ and JP. No matter what we spend, Ange will bring in quality. I truly believe that he will. I do have that faith in him. I mean, when you look at the recruitment that Ange has been responsible for, JP, you do have a level of trust that regardless of what the budget is, he'll make it work. But we just want the board to back him. That's the big thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we've always got to learn from mistakes in the past, but I mean, those mistakes were a long time ago, and even in recent past, I mean, the Rodgers season where it went terminado that's now like what, 5 years ago?
A Spanish vibe going on the show today.
Yeah, that's 5 years ago now. Really, if you think about it. So there's been a lot of time to sort of reflect on that, and I definitely think Ange Postecoglou as well is quite cognizant of the fact that Celtic are not the type of club that are going to go out and fling money around like in a mad fashion. I don't think he's expecting them to do that. I think he understands that it's not going to be about throwing money at players or trying to buy players that are out with our reach. I think the reason it got a bit muddy or messy with Brendan Rodgers is that he was kind of, I think he was wanting Celtic to kind of overreach a bit, and it was like that kind of middle ground between going for really top players who want top money, and he wasn't willing to sort of yield on that. And I mean, I don't know how much we would have had to pay for Timothy Castagne or, you know, the other players that were kind of almost there or almost here. But the fact is that he went to I think he went to a Serie A club, and now he's at Leicester. So he's obviously on crazy money at Leicester, I think. So I don't know. I think we've done well so far, really, really well, better than any of us expected, I think, in terms of the signings and the quality. So, you know, long may that continue, and it's just exciting to see who we could get in the door next. But that 25 million burning a hole in your pocket, I can tell.
It is, yes. I'll spend it for him if he wants. I think your example there of Rodgers and Castagne is a good one, right? Because at that stage, JP, the Celtic board might have been looking at it going, right, we can win the league in season 2 by bringing in Johnny Hayes, Olivier Ncham, an unknown 19-year-old from PSG on loan, Marvin Compere and Jack Hendry later on. We can still win the league. And that, I think, was their mentality. And what Brendan Rodgers wanted, maybe not by season 2, but certainly throughout maybe the latter part of that season into season 3 under his tenure, is to push the envelope, like you say. And he's saying, well, let's bring in Castagne. Where was he? Was he playing in Italy? Was it Atalanta at the time?
Yeah.
Let's bring in Castagne. What would that have cost the club? And I think the board at that time, rightly or wrongly, would have said, well, what are we basing this on? Because he's not really done that well in Europe at this stage, is he? Brendan Rodgers for Celtic. Whereas Ange, and I know that we could have done better. Bodo Glimt was a massive kind of disappointment for us last season, JP. But I think we've seen enough to think, well, if we get more building blocks in there, Ange might develop us on that stage. So I think the argument's slightly different. I mean, some might say that the Brendan Rodgers side of his first season, Invincible Treble side, was a better team. That's an argument that could rage on for hours and days and weeks. However, I think that if Ange comes to the board and says, this is the investment that I'm looking for, at least he can back it up in many ways, because we have shown that we can compete not just in Europe, but away in Europe, something that's been a big issue. I mean, the Martin O'Neill season that we were talking about, we lost every Champions League group stage game away from home. We lost the 3 of them. And we lost to Valencia away in the UEFA Cup. So I think that we've shown some progress. Some might say not enough to spend 25 million quid in season 2. But when will that time come, JP? When will that time when we embrace the fact that we are going to try and do something beyond the domestic game? When will it come? Will it ever come? That's a big question, I guess.
Well, arguably you could factor in and put the 12 million spending of Jota and Carter Vickers down to last season. Mm-hmm. So if you were taking that out of the 25 million, you're only really spending 13 this summer, because you've spent that already. You've committed to spending that in last summer, so that money is to one side. So
budgeted,
what you're really asking them to do is spend 13 million, and asking a board to spend 13 million when they've just got a guarantee of somewhere in the region of 30 to 40 million for group stage football in the Champions League. Is that really a lot to ask? Not really. No, I don't think. You would expect a team, when they've got guaranteed Champions League football, to tool up accordingly for the competition that they're going to go into. It's not as if it's so alien, the alien concept of not having the qualifiers and not having that kind of, we've got these players on the back burner that we might sign if we get in, and then this is the where we'll shop if we don't, and if we're into the Europa League or whatever. We've got that certainty. And somebody mentioned something about the following season and getting Champions League for the following season. I don't know if somebody can maybe tell us in the comments, what is the state of play for the following season? Has that been decided? Like, if Celtic win the league next season, or this season, should I say, do we then get access to the Champions League? Or does that depend on coefficient points and all the rest of it?
I'm going to say this because it was brought up in one of the WhatsApp groups that if you win the league this season, you go straight in again. It's a similar scenario to what it is this season.
Right. Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. I know that, is it Miravchik67 does a lot of work on Twitter, and he shares that, and it's it's brilliant actually, the research he puts in. But yeah, from what I understand, JP, it's the same scenario next season. So you could be looking at 2 big Champions League bounties. And I guess I'm also saying, let's not always just focus on the bounty. Let's focus on doing something whilst we get there to the party. Hello LP, we need a sub goalie. I do agree with that, but there was a previous list, and Scott Bain was on my list of players that we should shell out and move on. But all I hear for Ange is how much he rates. He's even calling him, is it Bainey or Bainsy? He's got a
Bainey
nickname for him, and he rates him, and I think he likes him as part of the squad. So will we go into the market for another goalie? I agree that we probably should. Whether or not we will, I'm not so sure. No, Doran has to be Joe Hartful or Bakyogo. He agrees with you, JP. Cameron Carter-Vickers, an honourable mention because he was only a loan, but hopefully becomes a permanent move soon. Absolutely agree with that as well. He's obviously spoken about his future. And Celtic put out a teasing tweet as well, JP, talking about international Celts, even though officially Cameron Carter-Vickers is no longer a Celtic player.
Neither's Karamoko Dembele as of today.
What does the future hold for Karamoko? Where do you see his level at this stage? Let's be realistic. So, as a 13-year-old playing for a development team, heralded as one of the bright young things, won a European award, an individual award. Makes his debut as a 16-year-old. JP plays in Europe at 16, now at 19. His Celtic career has ended, with a whimper.
I just wonder about the people round about him. You're always a bit concerned about people round about players like that and what they're filling their heads with. Or you should be this, or you should be that, or you should have played this amount of games or that amount of games. And I don't know. I said before, there's not many stories of players that have left Celtic at his age that have gone on to do, remarkable things at another club. So I might be proved wrong with him, but I just think if he was going to be the player that we all maybe kind of thought he was going to be a couple of years ago, he was in the Nike advert and all of that kind of stuff. If he was going to be that player, I'm pretty sure Celtic would have offered him a contract. I'm not 100% sure, but fairly sure that Celtic would have offered him a contract. Why would they let someone like that slip through their fingers if he was going to be this mega star that everybody anticipated him going to be? What his career will look like now, I have no idea. I don't know what interest there is in him. There will be interest in him, of course, but I don't think it will be at the level that he maybe expects it to be, because ultimately he's not done enough at any level at Celtic to show that he is this guy worthy of this ridiculous contract, and high wages and everything else, which is probably where he sees himself. He'll have looked at, his contemporaries, Odsonne Edouard's only 4 years older than him, and look what Odsonne Edouard's doing, and Odsonne Edouard's doing that because he was banging in goals at Celtic at 19 and playing in the first team. So Karamoko Dembele is now 19 and doesn't have a lot to show for his Celtic career. I get that he had a really bad injury that essentially ruled him out of most of this season, and who knows, it's a sliding doors moment. Had he not got that injury, he might have featured this season, but I doubt it. You look at our midfield and forward line. Is Karamoko Dembele getting a game ahead of Abada and Jota and Maeda when he comes in and all that? No chance.
Nowhere near it. And Abada's a great example. What he did as a 19-year-old at Celtic, he's not that much older than Dembele. And he's a player that next season I think is going to be huge for Celtic if he develops the way that we've seen him developing this season. I think, there was always this worry and concern whenever anyone was writing about Dembele. The name Islam Farouz fell into the piece, fell into the narrative, and there was this concern that it might go the same way. And I can't say it's exactly the same because, he did play for Celtic. He did get game time. But in the manner of his departure is going to be completely different because, you know, when Farouz left Celtic, I'm pretty sure if we could have done, we would have kept him because he was that, you know, highly thought of at the time. His career went south, of course, literally went south. And I think Dembele at this stage needs to find his level. And that's the big thing that might be a reality check for him, JP. Find your level, pal, because it's maybe not even Scottish Premiership.
Find your position as well, because I don't really know what position he is. Like, I mean, there's talk of him played out in the wing or whatever, but I don't really necessarily think he's a winger. I think he's probably more of a number 10 or someone that plays in the hole, like a floating role, like that kind of thing. But I mean, he's so slight that, you know, I'm pretty sure, you know, Messi was probably told at a young age that he wasn't going to do the business, but he obviously went on to prove people wrong. But maybe that's more to do with Messi's mentality, you know, aligned to his football skill, obviously. But I think Dembele clearly has skills, you know, there's no doubt about it. He's probably a you know, full of tricks and everything else. But, you know, translating that into a game in Scottish football, that doesn't mean to say you're going to be a great player. Do you know what I mean? I think I don't know. It's an interesting one because I'm genuinely keen to see what happens next for him and watch how his career develops. Because when you've got so much fanfare at a young age like that, it just reminds me of the whole. I mentioned him before, Sonny Pike, the boy that was at Ajax.
Yeah.
On the big breakfast in the back garden doing keep
I remember it.
All that. And you know, like Chris Evans and Gabby Roslin were giving it. Oh, he's going to be, you know, he's going to be a superstar. You saw him here first. Never heard of him since.
No.
You know, and he was like an English kid at Ajax, which was, you know, in their youth system. It was this was in the sort of mid-90s when Ajax won the Champions League and stuff like that. With it when they had like
he had a boot deal. He had a boot deal on everything at that time.
It's
incredible.
And you know, I think it was Thierry Henry said recently that Ajax team is the best Champions League winning team he's seen because of who they all were and what they all were at that age. You know, Kluivert and Davids and all the rest of them. You know, and then they went on to have, you know, crazy careers with other clubs and won more trophies and more Champions Leagues with other clubs. So to be at Ajax at that time, incredible. And then it didn't amount to anything. So
no. It's an interesting tale, but you're right. You know, a lot of that attention at a young age doesn't come to fruition, and then you've got guys that work really, really hard on fancies like Tony Ralston, who we spoke about at the top of the show, who comes through and he's a pivotal member of the Celtic squad going into season number 2. There's plenty more questions, but you know what? We'll pick up on them next week, JP, because we'll still be in the pre-season. And I'll let you all know what the Nottingham Festival's like tomorrow. What is a Nottingham crowd like? I don't know. I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully it doesn't rain. Hopefully we get a wee bit of sunshine. A wee bit of colour in the cheeks, JP, tomorrow. I've never seen Jerry Cinnamon live, so that'll be a new one for me as well.
We had them in King Tut's, and he was not even headlining, and he'd been given 100 tickets to sell. He sold all 100 tickets, and he went on stage, and people were going absolutely mental for him. And I wrote in my wee report at the end of the night at the time that I expected him to come back and sell out King Tut's. Based on that performance and the crowd reaction and all that. And he did come back and sell out King Tut's. But in no way would I ever have thought that he would be selling or sold out one night at Hampden and, you know, well on his way to selling out too. I mean, that's incredible. I mean, that's more than what Liam Gallagher's doing. So Jerry Cinnamon is worth more tickets in Glasgow than Liam Gallagher, which is kind of absurd. But it's amazing as well. It's a great story. You know, to see somebody like that go from playing tuts to 100 people as a support act to then going and headlining Hampden, headlining the National Stadium.
Can you remember who he was supporting? Can you remember who he was supporting that night?
I've got a feeling it was either Raymond Mead, who now plays bass with him and plays bass in Ocean Colour Scene. It was either Raymond Mead or a guy called John Lennon McCulloch.
Oh, John! Listen, he watches Axom.
Does he? Oh,
I kid you not, he's a big Celtic fan, is John.
I think he's dropped the Lennon from
has.
the name. And he's in a band now, I think. He's in a band.
Children of the State.
There you go,
Yeah, living in Manchester. Big shout out to John. There you go, Everything comes back to Celtic.
Yeah, he was a nice kid. His dad was his manager, if I remember rightly. Like, his dad was kind of looking after him. Yeah, nice kid. So it was either Raymond or John Lennon McCulloch.
Brilliant. Love it. I'll let you know how I get on with Jerry tomorrow. Hopefully I can maybe get a wee chat with him as well. Because I'm sure he's a Celtic fan.
Yes.
There you go. Look at that. All the good guys. It's been an absolute pleasure, JP. I'll let you go away and have a wee nap again because you've been a busy lad.
I'm heading to Edinburgh, working a gig at Sneaky Pete's tonight. Theo Bleak, if anybody fancies it. She's very good, or they are very good. The band. They've been a couple of different names in the past. They were called Saint Martins at one point. And way back, they were in a band that played the tea break stage when I was working at Tea in the Park. And they played that gig and then subsequently disbanded and then came back as a different band. It's all a bit fractured, but the talent is still there. And they're playing Sneaky Pete's tonight. So
you enjoy that, JP. And thank you, everybody, for getting involved. I hope you have a fantastic weekend, every single one of you. Thanks for joining us on all the platforms. If you're on YouTube, like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit your notifications bell. We're working on lots of content. We're about to record another video in half an hour's time. Thanks for all your support. And thank you, JP Mason, for joining me on A Celtic State of